Melissa Chan writes about what it takes to achieve a righteous revolution. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a graphic novel that I read. I am back on that graphic novel grind, and today's graphic novel is all about revolution and China and fascism. I am referring to You Must Take Part in Revolution by Melissa Chan and with art by Badekau, which was published in 2025. For those who don't know, Melissa Chan is a Chinese-American writer who's been writing for the past 10 plus years. She is mostly a journalist, and writes about international affairs, especially in Asia, and has spent quite a bit of time in Hong Kong. I believe this is her first sort of fictional book, but it might be based on her experiences with, America and China and her life living in Hong Kong. It's also worth noting that she was kind of banned from China, expelled as a journalist because they felt that she was pushing Western propaganda, which you could argue either way, I think there. Also, Badekau is a Chinese-Australian artist who was known for writing sort of political cartoons aimed at China as it has become more authoritarian. And he eventually left because he became disillusioned, but his family has experienced some persecution back in China because of his dissenting nature. So both interesting people, and I hope to encounter more of their work in the future. I should point out that I found this at a very progressive bookstore in Vancouver. I probably wouldn't have found this otherwise because this doesn't seem to be from a very well-known publisher. And again, I haven't seen this much on the internet, so just random happenstance, I think. This did come out this year, but I will be spoiling it in the summary in the analysis section, so I encourage you to go out and find it if you're interested in reading more about it, which I definitely encourage you to do. But until then, or without further ado, let's talk about You Must Take Part in Revolution. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So You Must Take Part in Revolution begins with a sort of in media res moment where the character of Andy is using pigeons to bomb the CCP headquarters in China, in Hong Kong, I believe. And then the story flashes back to when Andy first got to Hong Kong in 2019. He is a first-generation American who is returning to Hong Kong after his parents were sort of exiled from there in the 80s after the Tiananmen Square protest. And he is there for the new Hong Kong protest and wants to be active, but also just wants to get by in his vet job. And he makes friends with a couple of people, including an older woman who's seen protests before, Maggie, who is slowly becoming more militant, and Olivia as well, who asserts that the protests aren't really going to achieve anything, but still shows up. We see as time goes on Maggie becoming more extremist, running with a group of people who prefer direct action to protest, and Andy stumbles across them when they're building a bomb, which he tells them that they shouldn't do, and is worried about maybe turning them in so that they don't hurt anybody. Maggie then uses that bomb to try to blow up a police car. However, a parent and their child are walking by and they die in the process. This results in Maggie getting sent to prison for life to be made an example of, and the Chinese government is starting to crack down more on these Hong Kong protests. The story then flashes forward to 2030. Andy is still working as a vet in a surveillance state, China, specifically Hong Kong, where the government is watching everyone's move and passing laws that restrict movement. And there's also a specific booklet, from the Glorious Leader, that people have to recite on command. And one of Andy's friends puts him in contact with an anarchist who needs first aid. He says, he doesn't do people; he works more on human being or animals. But they recruit more of his help as he's willing to give it. Unfortunately, he's not willing to leave someone behind in one case when the police are catching up to this group, and they sort of drag him away and tell him that they're willing to hurt him if he doesn't help the anarchist in this moment. And all of this sort of disillusions Andy, as he by 2032 he then goes and joins the military in Taiwan to help the Americans against the Chinese government, which he considers oppressive at this point. But it's very clear that America doesn't really have something much better in mind, especially as President Schroeder has taken over in a coup, and they are doing their own form of proto-fascism in America. But they're determined to sort of prove that they're strong, so they're kind of provoking a war with China. Andy is writing letters to Maggie using Chinese emojis in an effort to connect with her, which does seem to give her hope now that she's in prison. He also reunites with Olivia, who is in Taiwan, and they seem to be connecting pretty well, although we do find out that Olivia is a Chinese spy who is sort of planting mics on Andy in an effort to find out what the military is doing in Taiwan, the American military in particular. And again, we see that both sides really want to provoke war to prove their strength, but China ultimately decides to nuke Taiwan in a way that they view as safe so that they can still have access to its resources, but they end up blowing up a lot more of Taiwan or Taipei in the process, and this kind of irradiates Taiwan and causes it to split into two, with one side being controlled by the Chinese and the other side controlled by the Americans. The story then flashes forward to 2035. Taiwan is split into two. Andy is now doing extremist terrorism. Essentially, he's attached bombs to pigeons and sent them into Hong Kong to blow up CCP buildings and whatnot, headquarters. And the government can't really do anything about it because they're trained on drones rather than just these birds. Lower tech options there. Olivia kind of seems hopeless, but she's still reporting to the Chinese government. And she also witnessed the nuclear attacks firsthand, it would seem. Andy fights a fellow soldier who says that the Americans are on the right side, but he asserts that they're not because they're jailing Chinese citizens in America, Chinese immigrants in America at this point, which feels, very cogent, especially at the time that I'm talking about this. Olivia, meanwhile, is told to investigate the bombings that have taken place, and her trail eventually stumbles across what Andy's doing and realizes that he's doing it with birds, which she alerts the Chinese government too, and they don't really know what he's going to do next, except Olivia gets word that Andy's been talking to Maggie, and she thinks that Andy is going to try to free Maggie. They go to the prison, and they're on the lookout for these bird bombs, and Olivia and Maggie talk about hope and revolution and things like that, and how Maggie is still sort of for the cause. But we find out that the birds were a trick, and Andy actually uses rats to blow up the prison. And Andy then tries to escape with Maggie, but also Olivia, because Maggie wants her to come along and fight for the cause. But in the process, Andy gets shot in the head. Olivia manages to shoot down the people who were chasing them. As the story comes to a close, Maggie is about to die, or she's going to stay behind with Andy as he's dying, and she urges Olivia to carry on and carry out Andy's cause in order to one day free the people of China. And that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there is a fair bit to talk about with "You Must Take Part in Revolution." One of the main themes that Chan is working with here is that of living in war and fascism. So it's important to note that both the United States and China are beholden to warmongering authoritarians in this story. You might see this as like American propaganda about how the Chinese government is fascist and authoritarian and represses the people. But the same thing is happening to the United States in this story. Like the current president took over in a coup, isn't really listening to the people, and is generally unpopular. Just trying to silence and take control of the country in any way that they can. Andy deals with a years-long struggle in Hong Kong. We see like him trying to cope with the fact that his rights are being restricted, that his movements are being surveilled. Everyone's movements are being surveilled in Hong Kong, and the Chinese government is trying to take as much control of it as possible. Maggie is a political prisoner. Sure, she actually did the crime that she's being held for, but she did it in an act of revolution. And the government is basically trying to reform, or not reform, but brainwash her into believing the side of the government here, even though the government is oppressing the people and taking away rights. So both characters are really dealing with a tough time. Olivia is even seen as a victim in some way because she's forced to do all of this on behalf of the government. She can't really say no, and she's forced to rat out close friends and family in an effort to save herself. So everyone is kind of a victim here, and it's really difficult to live under fascism in these times. You have limited freedom, and it's not like there's a sudden case of fascism, a sudden case of authoritarianism. It takes place over the course of several years. Many people could react to something happening immediately, but if it happens slowly and surely, then you're less likely to really notice that slow crawl towards fascism. You're much more likely not to react in a way that is able to stop it, which I'm sure is what the authoritarians want. It's much easier to do something slowly than it is to do it all at once, and that makes life terrible too, because you're forced to suffer the agony of that slow crawl as you see it happen. And a lot of these characters are dealing with scars of the scars of living under these awful regimes, the mental scars and the physical scars as well. There's a specific quote that they say that I believe Maggie says, which is, "We are the wreckage of human power and ambition," which goes pretty hard, but it gets at the exact sentiment that these people are facing or dealing with. Like, they are just collateral in these people's ambition to taking full control over an entire country in a very authoritarian manner. Like, these people don't really care about what they leave in their wake, even though they're ruining families, ruining relationships, and just taking away everything that people once held dear. It's not ideal, and it feels awful, and I can witness it happening, in the present moment that I'm talking about this. And so a question then becomes: can there be revolution in general? Can people revolt against the masses here? Or revolt against those in power and take control back of their country? I think that there can be such a thing. There can be revolution in any case. It takes a lot of work and it's hard. But the next question then becomes: can people stomach what it takes to do a revolution? Specifically, the violent aspects of it. Because whenever someone suggests in this story that they have to do a little bit more than protest, there is kind of a pushback to that. They're like, oh, we can't use the tools of our oppressors. But what else can you do? I feel like in the case of many authoritarians, they just bowl over the protesters. Like, sure, there's that visible display of anger and frustration, but as long as the people aren't doing anything about it, you can just do whatever you want. You can just say these are, communist sympathizers and push them to the side and disregard their worries. And so there might need to be something more, and the question is, can people stand that? Can people do that without feeling uneasy? And I don't think it's that easy. Like, it takes a lot for Andy to get to that point, and not many other people can reach that point or are even capable, and that's fine. Like, you don't have to do violence, but you certainly have to make the government feel your anger in a visible way. It's not always, in my opinion, it's not always non-violent action that achieve answers. And I think to some extent, Melissa Chan is arguing that too, pointing out that sometimes revolution calls for something more noticeable that might not always be the publicly, safe option to go with. And then elaborating a little bit more on violent revolution, because Melissa Chan talks about that too. Like, violent revolution comes at a price. Like, you have to kind of sacrifice who you are in order to achieve revolution if you're going to partake in revolution at all. Like, peaceful protest will only get you so far, as I said before. But there are dangers of extremism, of engaging in violence, because you're going to be shot on sight, you're going to be sent to prison if they catch you, but they also might send you to prison regardless if they feel that you're being an obstruction towards their achievements of creating this fascist state. But there's related to that, there's a cost of doing nothing. Like, sure, if you engage in extremism, you'll be a target, but if you do nothing, that lets that kind of develop on its own. So the people have to partake, and sometimes that requires maybe a more violent effort, as I think Chan is somewhat arguing in this story. We specifically see Andy's fear of of engaging in violent effort in this story, how he worries about what that could possibly mean. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. "I thought I hated violence. What I finally realized was that I didn't hate it, I feared it. And to overcome that fear, I needed to accept it. That is what the bomb taught me." And so that's just Andy reflecting on what the nuclear bomb taught him. Like, when he saw that, he realized violence is going to happen no matter what. So I have to be violent. I have to do violent means to achieve this revolution. And if I don't, people are going to die. People are going to get hurt regardless. So it does seem like Chan is sort of arguing that, everyone's has to play a part. That's kind of based on the title of the story, because it's taken from Mao's writings. You must take part in revolution, sort of turning what the Chinese government says on its head, because they supported Mao, and that's kind of their figurehead. Everyone kind of has a role to play, is what Chan is getting at. But I do think that Chan never really fully addresses the answer to this. Like, is violent revolution necessary? And is violent revolution good? Is it something that should be done and is morally righteous? Chan kind of leads us to that point and leaves it up to us to find the answer, but I would have liked a solid, this is how things go, like, take a stance on it rather than just sort of gesture at it. Although you could argue that Chan kind of is making a statement there by making Andy look somewhat heroic and die a martyr's death here. There are other interesting aspects of the story. I do like the art. It is pretty good. A good use of black and white and shadows. And there is sort of red whenever there's a violent action on display. Really adds emphasis to the story. There's also a discussion of the need for hope in these dark times, specifically for Maggie, who's in prison the entire time and is being brainwashed by the government, essentially, and beaten and stuck and tortured, essentially. There's a need for hope in revolution. It's not just violence that you need, it's also the spirit of revolution, the spirit of a better tomorrow, which a lot of people kind of miss. And then also the question of the use of the tools of the fascist to defeat the oppressors. I think personally that, if you have to engage in violent revolution, why not use the tools of the oppressor? That doesn't make you like the oppressor. Just because you're using the tools doesn't make that so. I'm sure people would disagree with me there. But if you're not going to use what the oppressor is using, then you're just giving them free range to use the most despicable tools imaginable without suffering real consequences to it. So that's something that Chan talks about here. Again, I don't think Chan completely falls on either side of it and answers the question that they're posing, but it is something to consider and think about as you're reading this. Anyway, those are my thoughts on You Must Take Part in Revolution by Melissa Chan. Pretty solid read. I'm glad that I found it. I do think there are some aspects that are kind of missing, like, for example, Andy's journey into the darkness, I would say. Andy's journey towards becoming a violent revolutionary. I don't think that's the development of that is fully displayed. There's a lot of time skips which just sort of assume that that's happening, and I think a little bit more could have been done to show his progress to that point. But other than that, I think this is a really solid read. Really got me thinking quite a bit, and there's definitely parallels to the world we're already living in, especially because the protest in Hong Kong happened in 2019. That was something that Chan kind of took from history, and there's a bunch of marches towards fascism happening all around the world. So this is something that I think people need to consider as they move forward into the future. But if you have any thoughts on this, or if you want to say something about something I said in my review, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this book, this author, or the artist as well. Also join the Discord if you want to have further conversations about books, movies, TV, that sort of thing. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and revolutionary travels. Farewell.